All right, if you are struggling with objective 2 for structures and property of matter, we are doing another thinking map for this objective, just because I find that having images, especially for items that are so small, really help for your understanding, and you just get a better picture of what you're learning since it's brand new, and it helps give you some connections that you might not already have. So again, I've labeled it structures and property of matter. It's objective 2, and right now we're actually going to take a couple pages of notes on this because it's on physical changes and chemical changes. So the first one we're going to talk about is physical change. So a physical change is usually a reversible process, and it changes just the physical properties of something. So I decided to make a chart. I labeled it properties, or clues would be another good word to put at the top of this, examples and descriptions. And so I made it a 3-column, and there are 5 different properties or clues that you'll be writing down. So you want to just start off with a chart. The very first one we're going to talk about for a physical change, a very good indicator that a physical change has happened might be a color change. And I say might because it also indicates a chemical change as well, but you'll see the difference when we talk about chemical change later. So a color change. If I paint a piece of paper, I'm just, physically changing the appearance, so I might change it from a white color to a green color. That would just be a physical change. If I melt something, that's another example of a physical change. So a candle burning, or if I melt chocolate, it can change from a solid to a liquid, and then it'll go back to a solid if I cool it back down. So it is a reversible thing that'll happen. So after you blow out your candle, you have your liquid wax, and ends up hardening back again into a solid state after it cools back down. So it is reversible. Another clue is that the matter stays the same. So I might change from a solid, a liquid, to a gas, but it's still the same thing. So for example, the phases of water. So I have, solid ice, I have liquid water, and then I have water vapor, okay? Even if it's ice, vapor, boiled, or in a bottle, it's all still considered water. So that would be just a physical change. So that's something really important to know, is that if you're changing from state to state, from a solid, a liquid, to a gas, it is only a physical change. That is not a chemical change. Next, if I change the shape, so an example of this would be like cutting something or breaking something. So if I cut a piece of paper, it's still paper. I just cut it in 2. Or if I break glass, it's still pieces of glass. It's just in several pieces now. I didn't change anything other than just like the shape or the appearance of it. And then form changes, which really connects with these shape changes. So like clay is a great example of this. Clay can be formed, so I can make different shapes out of Play-Doh or clay, but it's still considered clay no matter what shape I form it into. So those are all really good indicators or clues of a physical change. And I added some notes on the back of this as well that I think are really important for you to kind of understand. So, sorry it's a little bit difficult to read now that I've darkened my chart, but all substances have physical properties. So a property is a characteristic of matter that helps identify or describe it. So for example, a log's physical properties would include like its mass, its volume, its density, the type of wood that it came from. So really physical properties are any of like these below things, like the appearance. What kind of texture does it have? What color is it? How does it smell? Melting and boiling points are very unique for a lot of different substances, so a lot of the times you can know that a substance will, boil at 100 degrees Celsius, and you can know, oh, that's going to be, water. So melting and boiling points can be very unique to different substances. Density is really unique to different substances, so that can help you identify a substance as well. Density, I always refer to it as like, does it sink or does it float? If it sinks, then it's, more dense. If it floats, then it's less dense. Solubility is on here because it's something that you can see, but it's also considered a chemical property just because a chemical reaction could possibly happen if it is soluble. If it's not soluble, then it wouldn't be a chemical change. And many more. This is not the only list, but there can be a ton of different things. So physical change includes that state of matter, and it is something that's reversible. This is kind of like the key, most important thing that I would want you to take away from these notes, and that's why I kind of added it in at the very end. So physical change includes changing those states of matter, solid, liquid, and gas, because it is reversible. I can go back and forth from a solid, a liquid to a gas, a liquid to a solid, things like that. So since we know about a physical change, now we're going to talk about a chemical change. And again, feel free to pause this video so that you can take down all these notes. It's really important that you guys have these notes in your notebook so that you have them to study from and utilize. And also, if you have to do a retake ticket of some sort, these would be something that I would request from you or actually look for to make sure you have these too. So again, I've labeled it structures and property of matter. We're still talking about objective 2, but this time we're going to talk about chemical changes. So a chemical change is usually irreversible, and it's an irreversible chemical reaction. And what's going to happen is, in a chemical change, the atoms are going to be rearranged. So it's no longer the same substance anymore. So again, I made my chart. There are 5 different ones. I've got 3 different columns that we're working off of. And these are going to be your properties or your clues that a chemical change happened, some examples and a description. So the very first one we're going to talk about is a color change. And again, I told you, hey, that was the first thing that we had for a physical change. So how are they both going to be clues for 2 different things? Well, we said a color change might be, for a physical change, would be like just I painted a piece of paper, okay? Something that I physically did to change it. A color change, on the other hand, for a chemical reaction, a great example would be like the bread dough baking. When you first put it in the oven, it's like a really light color, and then after it's heated and baked, it then changes to like more of a brownish gold color. Okay, that's something that I didn't like physically do to change it. So it's actually a chemical change that's taking place when you're baking that dough. Smell is another really good indicator of a chemical change. So like eggs rotting, it smells really bad afterwards. It's a different smell. If new matter is created, it's definitely a chemical change. So wood burning, the wood turns to that ash. It's a totally different thing that's produced afterwards. A gas would be present. So we put baking soda and vinegar to make our little volcano that came out blue. It also produces a gas called carbon dioxide. And if I would have put like a balloon on top, it actually would have filled up a whole balloon. So if a gas is created, it's a chemical change. And then heat or light. If heat or light is created when you're like mixing 2 things together, then you know it's going to be a chemical change as well. So a great example of this is fireworks. So when you burn chemicals, it's going to create light or heat, and it's a great indication that a chemical change has happened. So again, I added some things on the back for you. just kind of like some good summaries. So all substances also have chemical properties. So they do, all substances have physical properties and they all have chemical properties. And again, properties are characteristics of matter that help you identify or describe it. So for example, we're going to look at that same log. A log's chemical properties would include its flammability, which is how likely it is to burn. And again, that was one of the key terms on your Quizlet. And so if you look back on your little flip chart, a property of a material that tells you how easily the material catches fire. Okay, and they have a nice little fire. So flammability is a good chemical property. Toxicity, if it's a toxic chemical. If it's combustible, which is pretty close to flammable, but like if it'll explode. Again, I put solubility on here because if it does dissolve, then it is a chemical reaction that's happening. If it's an acid or a base, that would be another chemical property. And again, this list is not the only thing. There's a ton of different things. So something that's really important to take away from this is that a chemical change will rearrange its atoms to form something totally different, and it'll be irreversible. You can't change it back. So like the bread, after I've baked it, I can't turn it back into dough. There's no way for me to reverse that process. So chemical change rearranges the atoms, it forms something totally different, and it is irreversible. So those are all good things to take away for this objective.